it's actually having quite a detrimental impact on our balance of payments, which reduces our economic performance. So again, in terms of renewable energy and the difference that can make, it can help boost our economic performance, not just through the reducing the balance of payment deficit, but also through direct employment. Okay, so there are three principal types of unconventional gas that the companies are looking to exploit. The first one is this one. It's underground coal gasification, and that I'm not a petroleum geologist, but my understanding of this process is that a hole is drilled down into a coal seam. Air and steam is pumped down into the coal seam, and out to the other side you get the exhaust gases, which include carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, methane, and a whole bunch of other products, including the combustion products, tar and phenols and all the other nasty stuff that you get. And what you'll get there is a large cavity forming under what's called the overburden. The overburden is a rock layer which is supposed to be strong enough to make sure that that void doesn't collapse. And that's one of the questions that we have about unconventional gas. You know, what happens to these voids? Do they actually stay permanently stable? There are two areas that are licensed, as far as I'm aware, for unconventional gas extraction in Wales. The first is the D estuary off northeast Wales, and this is the second in the Llwchar estuary. There's the potential for underground coal gasification to be happening in places such as this. And of course, Swansea Bay was subject of an underground coal gasification licence that expired quite recently, and could theoretically be the subject of a new licence. So this is something that has direct significance to the communities around Porthcawl and Swansea Bay. The second one, this is coal bed methane, and there are two ways of extracting coal bed methane. The first is just to put your pipe into a coal seam, and in fact some methane is already being extracted from old mine workings, because there's methane under high pressure in the water in coal seams that just seeps out. So some is already taking place. But as Gerwyn Williams, the Director of Coastal Oil and Gas, conceded when he gave evidence before the National Assembly for Wales a few months ago, this is a process which over time will have to have fracking. So we're not just looking at shale gas in terms of fracking. Coal bed methane will also be something where fracking is used. The skull and crossbones is not something of my design, but this is a map which shows where different licenses for coal bed methane extraction have either been applied for or have been granted. So the white skull and crossbones, those are where an application has been made to extract coal bed methane. The black skull and crossbones are where an application has been granted, so those are consented coal bed methane extraction points. And the ones with a line going directly through them is where activity is actually taking place on the ground. So you can see that within a stone's throw of where we are now, there are either active coal bed methane sites, or there are sites where coal bed methane is being planned. And the third is the one that we've heard so much about, and that's shale gas and fracking. And essentially what happens here is that a very high pressure mix of water, chemicals and sand is put down a hole, and these holes are drilled to a depth of hundreds of feet to thousands of feet below the surface to get to the shale beds. It's pushed at very high pressure. That produces fissures in the shale, and that releases the methane, which is in the shale, and that comes back up to the surface, and you can do all sorts of interesting things with methane. Principally, of course, you can either feed it into the national grid as a gas, or you can burn it for producing electricity. And these are the shale gas licences in South Wales. So you can see that, in fact, Bridgend County is the only county that's entirely covered by existing shale gas licences. But there are large parts of Swansea, Llandudno, Vega Morgan and Newport that are also under licences. These are just the licences in South Wales. There are licences in North East Wales, and also there is a new round of licence sales that is due to happen next year. Now these licences, of course, are sold for a handsome fee to the Treasury. The proposed licences up for sale next year cover a huge swathe, so virtually the entirety of the South Wales coalfield. So this is something that is likely to develop unless we can put a stop to it. So what are the problems with these different technologies? Well, this is a dated study, I think it's fair to say, but a study nonetheless of what happens when you burn underground coal gasification. So this is the first one, and bear in mind the licences to do this, and the Cwpwr and the D estuaries in Wales. You can see that some of the chemicals here, some of which are highly nasty chemicals, some of them are up to 100-fold increased through underground coal gasification. With fracking, what you'll see is that there are lots and lots of lorry movements required. So we'll get to see a lot more of this on the roads in communities right throughout South Wales. The reason that you need lots of lorry movements, as I said before, each frack requires roughly about 4 million gallons of water, so that's a lot of water. Either it has to be piped in, or it has to be come in by lorries. The infrastructure itself is very very intensive of trucks and manpower and all the rest of it. So the steel tubes which go to make up the drill casing, so that's when the drill goes these thousands of feet down into the ground, they require an awful lot of steel, so you get those sorts of trucks coming through. If you remember in Balcombe, the village in Sussex, where an awful lot of protests happened quite recently, the quadrilla applied for a licence for 60 lorry movements a day, but apparently forgot that the lorries all had to come back out again, and asked and was granted consent for 120 lorry movements a day to go through the village of Balcombe. Once the fluid is pumped down into the substrata, anything between 15 and about 85% of that fluid comes back up. What happens to the rest of it? Well, who knows, and for the companies, who cares? Because you don't have to have a license to leave stuff in deep geological strata, and you don't have to pay to leave it there. But the stuff that does come back up is contaminated with whatever happens to be in the geology that is passing through. Now that could be metals, it could be salts, and it will certainly be radioactivity, because there is naturally occurring radioactive material deep down, and this fracking fluid that comes back up will be contaminated with radioactivity. Some of the ingenious ways that the fracking companies have found of dealing with this is by diluting it loads and loads and loads, so that it can then be disposed of, because of course the more you dilute it, the less radioactive the water is. Again, it's a water-intensive practice. This is the actual drilling site in Balcombe, and I attended a talk by John Gummer, who used to be Environment Secretary in Westminster, and is now Lord Deben, and sits, I think he's chair of the Climate Change Commission. And he said, for those, bearing in mind his political ideology, for those people who are opposed to wind turbines, just wait till you see what happens when a fracking rig turns up in your neighbourhood. Because he described all the activities surrounding fracking as fairly unpleasant. And that's one of the points to bear in mind, is that with fracking or any sort of unconventional gas exploration, this isn't something that communities embrace. I think every single place where fracking or test drilling has been applied for or is being carried out across the UK, the community rises up against it, and with good reason. So the political response to this has been to try and say, okay, well, actually fracking is all fine for a number of reasons. Number one, energy security. Number two, is because gas is needed as a bridging fuel, and that will get us to this nice renewable future. Well, actually gas, it's not a low carbon bridging fuel. The report that came out just the other week by Professor David Mackay makes quite clear that if you burn the gas that comes out as shale gas to use in your electricity supply, then it is 10 times more carbon intensive than the carbon intensity we need for our electricity grid by 2030. Now bear in mind also that even the fracking companies are saying, because of the difference in geology and because of things being quite different here in terms of the density of the population and so on, it's going to take us about a decade to start producing shale gas in large quantities. Well, that gives the industry about 5 or 6 years to reduce its carbon intensity by about 90%. I don't see that happening. But Professor Mackay says it is compatible with our climate change targets if we have carbon capture and storage. Well, carbon capture and storage is at least a decade away from commercial viability. There are no commercial carbon capture and storage sites operating in the world for this type of activity. And of course, carbon capture and storage depends wholly on you having storage sites. In South Wales, there are none. There are some off the north coast of Wales because there are existing gas fields there, but whether those gas fields are of significant enough scale to make it worthwhile, I think will be debatable. The only hope for the UK is that they're to bury carbon off the North Sea in those large North Sea oil and gas fields. So it's totally irrelevant to South Wales to say, well, carbon capture and storage will come to our rescue. Number one, it can't do in time, and number two, there are no sites. So when Charles Hendry, I think it was extolling the virtues of this report, I think there's a lot more to this report that can be used to demonstrate exactly why